Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and this week got a big episode. 5 stories about some different cults from history, and I am in a mood to talk about this. So no wasting time. Let's jump into it. Our first cult starts going back to the 1800s with Rhoda Wakeman, who was this hardworking New England mother of a gaggle of kids. She had a ton of kids. Only 9 of them survived, but had way more than that. After 25 years of marriage to Ira Wakeman, the relationship started going downhill. Rhoda came to believe that Ira had been possessed by the devil, which was what was causing him to make daily threats on her life, because he was basically bringing a sharpened razor to bed, and then he was just threatening to kill her with it. And he did this for 7 years. And look, it's 1800s New England. She's probably a very devout Catholic woman. She's not going to get divorced. So, rather than thinking, oh, maybe, this relationship is just over, he's fallen out of love with me, maybe we should go our separate ways. No, he's possessed by the devil, and the devil's making him bring a razor to bed. One day, though, according to Rhoda, Ira finally made a deal with the devil in which he would be saved from eternal damnation for killing his wife. And obviously he sold his soul, because that's the only thing the devil actually buys. Have you ever noticed that? This sounds like I'm about to start a Seinfeld bit. Well, you ever notice, this is a terrible Seinfeld impression, but you ever notice that the soul is the only thing the devil is interested in buying? How, that's very strange behavior. The devil doesn't want your money. Devil doesn't want, your heart or your brain or your wiener. He just wants your soul. I don't know. I find that strange. That's very strange behavior. Anyway, so that night, Ira came to bed with his razor, made his usual threats, but then he took out a scalding brand from the fireplace and forced it down on Rhoda's heart. And Rhoda, just that sort of trauma, she died pretty quickly and then woke up to Jesus and a horde of angels standing over her. And over the next 7 hours, God kind of sat with her, talked to her, and told her that her work on earth was not yet finished and that she needed to return to deliver the, quote, good news. And so just before she was jettisoned back to earth, 2 angels stopped her. It was like, yo, Rhoda, before you go back, here's the thing. The Antichrist and his agents are going to do everything in their power to kill you, because the fate of the entire world depends on her life. And this is a thing that happened in the 1800s and not some bad action movie. All right. Rhoda claimed that all of this happened. And they told her that if the Antichrist was successful in killing her, then the world would cease to exist, which I don't see that as a bad thing, right? Let's end it all right now. That solves all of our problems. But I don't know. It's just a lot of inconsistencies with that sort of religious messaging. Life on earth is full of suffering and sin, and it's awful. But when we die, we can go to heaven and everything's perfect. Everything's a paradise, right? But we have to stay on earth and continue to suffer and try to be good, share the good news to everyone. But we can't just end the entire world for everyone, because then that's playing God. We can't be God. God has to decide to end everything. I don't know. It's just, there's so many, whatever. So Rhoda comes back to life, allegedly. And for the next 30 years, Rhoda would tell this story to anyone who would listen. She actually garnered a small following for it. So to support herself and her religious endeavors, she and her brother Samuel sold magical potions from a makeshift stall outside of a cemetery, because they had to be extra stereotypical about their little cult that they had put together. During the course of Rhoda's potion business, the demon that plagued her husband had moved on to possess a man named Eben Gold. Ira, Rhoda's husband, had died later in 1833, under mysterious circumstances, i.e. Rhoda probably murdered him. Although this Eben Gold character never attempted to antagonize Rhoda, her followers did everything they could to annoy him so that he would kind of try. So like Rhoda points out this dude, Eben Gold. He is now possessed by the same demon that possessed my husband. And Eben's over there like, what? I'm just here, man. Like, I didn't do anything. But then all of her followers are over there like, you're a demon. Ooh, what are you going to do? You gonna go and like try to kill Rhoda because you couldn't do it when you were possessing her husband? And Eben's just sitting there like, what? I don't know what you guys are talking about. Please leave me alone. Well, by 1855, this alleged demon, had infiltrated the Wakemanites' inner circle, because that's what they had come to be called. Rhoda Wakeman's group were called the Wakemanites. And this demon apparently got tired of possessing Eben Gould and possessed a man named Amos Hunt. And one day, Amos presented Rhoda with a pie that was laced with arsenic. And although, like, Rhoda ate it, and she was, like, mildly inconvenienced with the physical effects of the arsenic, like, nothing happened, she didn't die, everything moved on. Even more, she insisted that the pie had not actually been laced with arsenic, but rather with a concoction of items like dog and human brains, dog and rooster eyes, bone oil, whatever that is, topaz, which is a gemstone. You would notice that if it was in a pie, platinum, and then basil for flavor, because of course. Which, look, and here's the thing. I don't know if you guys know this or not. This is the exact recipe that a demon would make in order to kill God's divine messenger. It's in the Bible somewhere, probably. The Wakemanites, after the pie incident, shunned Amos from the group, and Rhoda's brother Samuel actually sued him for $500. From there, the demon then departed Amos and possessed another Wakemanite named Justice Matthews. After Matthews' wife suffered a seizure, the Wakemanites immediately identified him as the carrier of that demon. Matthews, clearly the most gullible person in the group, begged them all to rid his body of the demon. They're all like, Matthews, you are possessed now. Look at what your wife was doing. She was seizing all over the floor. You did this because you're possessed by that demon. And he's just like, oh man, I don't feel any different, you guys. Are you sure? Please. I'm so scared right now because I don't want you to murder me. Please just get this demon out of me. And on December 23rd, 1855, Matthews was bound, gagged, and blindfolded in Rhoda's cottage. From there, the rest of the Wakemanites beat him with a club. And then, in an attempt to bleed the demon from Matthews' body, Samuel Wakeman slashed Matthews' throat with a pocket knife and stabbed him in the chest with a fork, obviously killing him because you got to get the demon out, right? Well, another Wakemanite, who was also probably possessed by the devil, later murdered 2 residents of the village the following week. And at that point, the members of the cult, including Samuel and Rhoda Wakeman, were arrested, tried, and all committed to insane asylums. And I don't think I mentioned this. I think they were in Rhode Island. No, Connecticut. New Haven, Connecticut. That's where they were. So just outside of Yale, which proves that Ivy League doesn't make everybody smarter because they were right there next to it. Anyway, our next story here, going forward about 100 years to the 1960s with Magdalena Solis, who was born in Monterrey, Mexico, to a poor family in the 1930s, and then later became a sex worker, like as soon as she figured out how her stuff worked and that she could use it to make a living. Happens to a lot of people who grew up in poverty. It's unfortunate. Her brother, Eleazar, acted as her pimp. Nice. Keep it in the family. In 1962, Santos and Caetano Hernandez, who were a pair of scammers who were hopping from village to village and convincing a lot of these ill-informed locals that these two men were high priests of exiled Inca gods, arrived in Monterey looking for some sex workers to provide some sex appeal to the scam, right? Because look, you have two dudes showing up. It's just a big sausage fest. It's not as convincing as if you throw a couple of scantily clad, attractive ladies next to them. And now all of a sudden, oh, you come from the Inca, you say. And if we start worshiping you, we'll get in on some of this action. Do tell, please. Tell me more. Now, here's the thing. If you know anything about Latin culture, you know already that the Incas were not from Mexico. But that did not matter to the illiterate and impoverished Mexican villagers in and around Monterey, especially after they were promised treasures and a cleansing of their bodies. They didn't care if it was the Incas, the Aztecs, the Navajo, whoever. Just make it better, please. Anything else we do clearly is not working. Maybe this will work. The only way, however, to make any of this happen was to join the Hernandez cult, even though obviously they weren't advertising it like that. They join the cult, they bring regular offerings, and then the women specifically have sex with the Hernandez brothers as often as humanly possible. So the Hernandez brothers, they recruit Magdalena Solis to this cult, initially as a sex worker. And they travel to the village of Yerba Buena and start their show. I think it's Yerba Buena? I don't know, whatever. The brothers, as they did, gathered the gullible villagers in a nearby cave. Then they would use this smoke screen, cool little special effects, and then they would introduce Magdalena as the reincarnated version of an Inca goddess, Coatlicue. Coatlicue. It's not how you say it. It's probably Coatlicue, but it's pronounced Coatlicue. So going to do that. The villagers, after seeing this, lose their minds. They have never seen anything like this before. But also, Magdalena lost her mind because she realized the one thing that she enjoyed more than being a sex worker was being worshipped like a god. And in less than a year, Magdalena took over leadership of the Hernandez cult. And during her rise to the top, two members tried to leave because they were tired of being sex slaves. And instead of understanding and letting them go, Magdalena sentenced them to death and lynched them in front of the entire cult as a promise of what would happen to anyone who decided to leave. So she immediately goes from 0 to 100 on cult leader status just after one show, right? Ladies and gentlemen, the Inca Gates Coadicu. And then Magdalena comes out and she's like, yes, this is my life now. Way better than anything I was doing before. And I don't blame her, right? You grow up poor in the Mexican desert and now all of a sudden everyone loves you and is worshiping you. Is it based on a lie? Sure, but who cares? Everyone seems happy. Let them go with it. And now you have all the power, you have more power than you know what to do with, right? So, not surprisingly, all right, the act of convincing a lot of dumb villagers that the cult was a group of Incan priests and having nonstop sex actually got old pretty quick. But Magdalena, to her credit, was pretty creative and decided that all of these orgies just weren't cutting it anymore. So, to spice things up, she began demanding human sacrifices that involved a blood ritual. Now, what is a blood ritual? I'm glad you asked. So the ritual always involved a member of the cult who was causing some kind of trouble. Maybe they were threatening to leave. Maybe they weren't doing the worshiping the right way, or maybe they were bad at sex or something. Who knows? And this person was picked, and then they were beaten, burned, and just cut and mutilated by other members of the cult to where they were, very bloody. What blood had not been splattered all over the cave during the beating was then drained from the person's body and deposited into a cup that was mixed with chicken blood, marijuana, and peyote. And then Magdalena would drink from the cup, hand it to her brother Eleazar to drink, and then to the Hernandez brothers, who had now been demoted to subordinate high priests of the Inca goddess and her brother, I guess. The other members were then allowed to drink from the cup, who were told that it would give them supernatural powers, exploding diarrhea not being one of them. And then, because there's no way you don't have diarrhea after that. There are at least 4 of these blood ritual sacrifices performed over a period of 6 weeks, with the final sacrifice involving a dissection of the victim's heart while they were still alive, or at least they started out alive. You die pretty quick when you have your heart literally ripped out of your own chest while you're alive. Crazy. In May of 1963, 14-year-old Sebastian Guerrero noticed a bunch of lights and sounds coming from a cave near Yerba Buena. And as any curious teenager would do, he went over to investigate. And when he got there, he saw the cult bashing a woman's face in with rocks and then cutting out another guy's heart with machetes. And that, like, God, it's got to be really scarring and horrifying to just walk up on that, right? And so as soon as he finished probably peeing himself out of fear, the boy sprinted 15 miles to the neighboring village of Villagrán and told police that he had seen, quote, a group of murderers who prey on ecstasy and who were gluttonously drinking human blood, which is a great vocabulary for a 14-year-old, right? Like, you ask any 14-year-old to recount that same scene today, you're probably getting something like, yo, I saw these people and they're drinking blood. It was wild, dog. And that's it. Not a group of murderers were preying on ecstasy and gluttonously drinking human blood. Just our education system really letting a lot of people down. So the next day, police investigator Luis Martinez took the boy home, but on the way back, Guerrero, the boy, showed the officer the cave where he had seen the ritual take place. And at that point, the two were never seen alive again. Following the disappearances, the Mexican police took the claim very seriously and set up a raid with the Mexican army in Yerba Buena. So on May 31st, 1963, the Mexican army invaded Yerba Buena and a shootout ensued. Eleazar and Magdalena were arrested on a farm with a giant pile of marijuana. The bodies of Guerrero and Martinez, the boy and the police officer who had gone to investigate, they were found nearby. Santos Hernandez, one of the original cult leaders, was shot by police while trying to escape. Cayetano Hernandez, the other brother, was killed by a cult member in the shootout who demanded to be made a high priest, which is a weird time to make that kind of request. The rest of the cult retreated to a cave and barricaded themselves inside, but the Mexican army chased after them and several of them were shot. In the end, Magdalena and Eleazar were sentenced to 50 years in prison for 2 murders. The cult members who survived the raid were sentenced to only 30 years in prison for 6 murders, mostly because the government kind of took pity on them for their illiterate and impoverished conditions. Right? Staying in Mexico for the next story here of Adolfo Constanzo, who was born on November 1st, 1962, to a 15-year-old Cuban immigrant mother. Although he was raised Catholic and served as an altar boy, he made several trips to Haiti with his mother to learn about voodoo, which obviously is that Haitian religion revolving around Bandai, an unknowable supreme creator, and Iowa, which is this group of spirits responsible for various parts of human existence. It's the original type of the voodoo that you see like in New Orleans. Like, this is where it originated from. Constanzo became a sorcerer's apprentice as a teenager and began practicing Palo Mayombe, which is this Cuban religion that involves a lot of animal sacrifice. So as an adult, Adolfo moved to Mexico City, and where he met 3 men, Martin Quintana, Jorge Montes, and Omar Orea, who would ultimately become his most devoted followers. He's already got himself a little cult because he's this little sorcerer's apprentice, which is not at all like the Disney movies. The group started a business where they would cast spells for good luck, which mostly involved sacrificing various animals like snakes and zebras and lion cubs, which how easy are zebras and lions? Like, how easily attainable are those things in Mexico? I did not think they were very common, but maybe they are. I don't know. Soon, word of Constanzo's spells attracted some of Mexico's most influential drug leaders, mostly all of them, who were happy to pay him for his magic to protect them from authorities. He also had paying clients from Mexico's wealthy elite, along with high-ranking corrupt police officers who subsequently got him connected to the cartel. Now, at first, Adolfo Constanzo would raid cemeteries to gather human bones to put into his magic potion. However, he soon realized that his magic would be so much more effective if he used a live human sacrifice instead of someone who was already dead. So, coincidentally, around this time, things started to go really well for the cartel once Constanzo made the switch. And so people are really thinking like, oh, okay, maybe there is something to this. After 20 people were sacrificed, Constanzo began demanding that he be made a full partner with the Calzadas, which was one of the most successful crime families in Mexico at the time, because his magic was that good and that they would take over the world with this, right? However, when the Calzadas rejected his demand, 7 family members disappeared over the next few days. Their bodies were later found with various body parts missing, including their ears, brains, and spines. Like, just ripping out the entire spine of a human person? No way, man. So he's still a free agent. Constanzo soon meets another notorious cartel, the Hernandez brothers, and joins their operation. I think this is a different set of Hernandez brothers than the ones that we just talked about. But he joined their operation. He also met a young woman named Sarah Aldrete, who quickly became his high priestess. And while Constanzo was busy shipping marijuana across the border into the United States, Sarah was left in charge of the cult, which by now had come to be known as the Narcosatanists, which has got to be like one of the coolest cult names ever. Just the Narcosatanists. Blah! Right? Anyway, in 1988, Constanzo moved into a secluded house in the desert. From there, he performed more live human sacrifices and stored massive shipments of cocaine and marijuana. However, he started to believe that his magic was wearing off, right? Like, a lot of the people he was allied with were getting caught or they were getting killed. You know, maybe the drug shipments weren't working out as well. And he started to think that like the brains of the people he was sacrificing weren't quite smart enough. So he needed to find a smart American brain to take his magic to the next level. Now, I don't know if American people on average are smarter than Mexican people. In my experience, it seems to be about the same, right? Education levels, pretty on par with each other, if we're being honest. However, on March 13th, 1989, 2 of Constanzo's followers kidnapped Mark Kilroy, a 21-year-old pre-med student at the University of Texas at Austin. Kilroy was on spring break and hanging out at a bar in Matamoros, which is a city on the border across from Brownsville, Texas, kind of, I think, close to the Gulf of Mexico. Kilroy was able to break free from his 2 kidnappers and ran down the street before he was intercepted by another truck at gunpoint. He was finally taken to Constanzo's house, where he was left inside the truck overnight. But then the next morning, the property's caretaker came out, gave him some bread, eggs, and water before Constanzo came out, taped his mouth shut, and then walked him to a storage cabin in a field near the house. And for the rest of the day, all through the night, Kilroy was sodomized and tortured by Constanzo and the rest of the Narcosatanists. When everyone was finally done, Adolfo Constanzo led Kilroy back out to the field and just decapitated him with a machete. He then took out Kilroy's brain and boiled it while the rest of the cult members buried the body. And so at this point, like, Constanzo's got to feel pretty good about himself, right? Kilroy, he's a pre-med student, obviously very smart. He's got his smart brain. He thinks his magic is going to be super, super good now. Well, upon hearing of Kilroy's disappearance, Texas politicians began pressuring Mexican authorities to actually do something about it. Police investigators who weren't already part of the cartel quickly learned of Constanzo's cult and that Constanzo had wanted a superior brain for his rituals. Officers then raided the ranch and found Constanzo's cauldron, which contained a dead black cat and a human brain. In all, they found the remains of 15 different bodies, including Kilroy's. So, before the raid, though, Constanzo knew it was coming. He flees back to Mexico City, but he was quickly found by police. And as officers approached the building, Constanzo began firing his machine gun at anyone he could see. And then finally realizing, like, this is it, they're closing in on him, he handed the gun to one of his followers and ordered him to shoot. And by the time police got to the room, Constanzo was dead. Despite being unable to arrest the leader, 14 other Narcosatanists, including his wife Sarah, were brought to trial. She and 2 other followers were convicted of multiple murders and given 60-year prison sentences. So, 2 more stories here. In 1993, Han Ming Chen, a professor at a Taiwanese university, joined a religious group that was founded by this guy named Yu Xia Chen. I don't know. Anyway, Han Ming, he found the group extremely interesting, especially since he had previously lived his entire life as an atheist. And he joins this group, and now he starts learning about God and Jesus and all of that. And once he had a firm grasp on all of that, he decided to branch out and form his own religious group. And he originally called his new group the Chinese Soul Light Research Association, but then after they moved to the United States, they changed their name to Chen Tao, otherwise known as the True Way. So basically, Chen believed that each person contained 3 souls and that there were quote unquote outside souls that acted as bad influences on the human body. He also believed that Earth had been through 5 tribulations dating back to the time of dinosaurs. And in each instance, the survivors of the tribulations lived in North America and were rescued by God in a flying saucer because, of course, right? Like, you know, that explains the pyramids probably, you know, and explains other stuff, I guess. I don't know. But, yeah, you know, God showing up in a flying saucer. Anytime you get stuck, that's the answer. God came down, picked all the survivors up, and kind of took them away for a little bit while Earth reset, and then brought them back. Hey, start over. Anyway, in 1997, Chen predicted that God would be seen on the same television channel all across North America at 12:01 a.m. on March 31st of the following year, regardless of whether or not that person had cable service. So essentially, he said, you know, he's basically saying, like, at 12:01 a.m., March 31st, 1998, God's just going to show up on your TV. Like, it's all, he's going to be on the same channel. And it doesn't matter if you got the bunny ears or if you got satellite or if you got cable, he's just going to break into your broadcast and he's going to give you a little message. And with that the group planted its headquarters in a wealthy neighborhood in Garland, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas. And by that point, the group had about 160 members, about a quarter of which, though, were children, which not great. All right. But what made Chen's group even more notable was that all of his followers were wealthy, educated, white-collar professionals. Not just the Asian community in Dallas, but like actual white people in Dallas, Texas, where anything that deviates from traditional biblical teaching is looked at very leerily, right? But this dude, apparently he's so charismatic, such charismatic little Asian fella, that he comes in and convinces a lot of these wealthy, white collar, Dallas Metroplex area workers that this is all legit. And like members, here's the thing, like members dressed in all white, they wore cowboy boots because Texas. They also believe that 2 of the children in the group were reincarnations of Jesus and Buddha. And like, I don't know, did they fight a lot? That's probably how they figured it out. No, Jesus is always right. The Buddha one over here, he's got his wires twisted. He ain't got it all right. But the little Jesus fella over here, that one, we like that one. He's going to send us. Is the UFO coming yet? When little Jesus fella, little Jesus kid Jesus, when's your daddy coming back with the UFO? All right, seems like it's about time. Shockingly, when the date of Chen's prediction came and went without anything happening, Chen reasoned that he had clearly misunderstood God's plans, and then he actually offered to be stoned or crucified for misleading his followers, which is nice, right? Like any other cult leader we've seen, when their doomsday prediction goes wrong, they're just like, oh, my bad. As I got the numbers crossed out. Here's a new date. But no, Chen, to his credit, was like, oh, I'm very sorry, everybody. I'm so sorry. I got the dates wrong. You can stone me or crucify me, whichever one you want. Because I love all of you. And I want to be best reader for you guys. And so... Oh, I love doing that voice. I know some people are probably very offended right now. I don't care. It's part of storytelling, and I'm sucking you into it. However, unlike most cults who continue to follow their crazy leader, several of Chen's followers moved back to China and Taiwan, where they had originally come from. 2/3 of the group disbanded altogether, with the remaining sect actually moving to Lockport, New York, outside of Buffalo, where they began to believe that a war between Taiwan and China would create a nuclear holocaust and that God would save them on his magic airplane. And that sounds far-fetched a little, but every now and then you get these stories coming out that China's going to take back Taiwan or take it over. And I don't know. They might be right. Who knows? How crazy would that be? That's the cult that got it right. You know, China invades Taiwan. The U.S. goes in to protect them. A nuclear war starts because Russia joins the Chinese side, starts dropping nukes all over the place. America responds by dropping its nukes all over the place. And we're in World War III. Everybody's getting nuked. And then all of a sudden, God just flies down in his magic little flying saucer and takes them up out of it. How nuts would that be? Oh, I kind of want it to happen just so people like me can just be like, well, all right, good for them. Good for them. I think I'm going to go kill myself now because what is life anymore? All right. Anyway, our final story here, and this one's a doozy. Starting in 1984, Joseph Kibwiteri and Credonia Mwerende each had separate visions of the Virgin Mary near the Ugandan village of Rawashamere, I guess. These words, African words, are hard. So Mary told Joseph and... So in these visions, the Virgin Mary told Joseph and Credonia that the apocalypse would occur at the start of the new millennium and that humanity needed to strictly obey the 10 Commandments to avoid eternal damnation. So 5 years later in 1989, the two ended up meeting each other, told each of them the visions that they had, and then they formed the group called the Movement for the Restoration of the 10 Commandments of God. So thanks to Idi Amin, the Ugandan Bush War, and a whole lot of AIDS, the Ugandan people were looking for literally anything to help turn things around. All right. Late 80s, early 90s in Africa. Like, life in Africa, if we're being honest, doesn't seem great any of the time. But in this particular time in history, things are really rough, right? So Several priests and nuns who had been defrocked by the church for all kinds of transgressions quickly jumped on board. The recruiting done by the group's new Catholic clergy, kind of former Catholic clergy, caused the movement's membership to explode, right? Because it's easy to give people this hope and they all join up. It's like, oh, all we have to do is follow the 10 commandments. We just have to do these 10 things, most of which we're doing already, and everything will be fixed. Count me in. Happy to do that. That's very simple, right? However, in 1992, the group was expelled from the village of Rawashamer. That's it. Rawashamer by the village elders, probably because they were just getting tired of all of the doomsday talk. Luckily, Credonia's father, who just so happened to have received a vision of his own, provided a large tract of land roughly 50 miles away in the village of Kanungu for the group to use. And by the late 90s, closer to their doomsday date of January 1st, 2000, the group had grown to nearly 5,000 people and had actually developed its own sustainable community inside pineapple and banana plantations in the Ugandan jungle. Now, Credonia, who maintained her position as one of the leaders in the group, claimed that she continuously received messages from the Virgin Mary through everyday objects like bananas, the walls of her hut, which had been disguised as like magical holy telephones. She even got messages from the Virgin Mary in dog poop. I don't know about that. I don't know. Like, I get it. God works in mysterious ways, but I don't know if they're that mysterious, right? Like, if God starts communicating to me through dog poop, I'm questioning God's mental health, if I'm being honest, right? Like, you have all these other things to communicate to me through, and you're going to choose dog poop. I don't know, man. Your God sounds a little crazy. That's just me being very reasonable, I think. As time went on, members of the group were discouraged from talking amongst each other as a way to obey the 9th commandment, which, as we all know, tells us to not bear false witness against our neighbor. On some days, communication only existed through sign language. Only one meal was eaten on Mondays and Fridays for some reason. Sex and soap were also banned from the community, which was a nod to the 7th commandment of not committing adultery, because, like, who's going to have sex with you if you smell like a durian soaked in rotten egg sewage? Nobody. Nobody's touching you. Are you kidding me? No basic hygiene, and you're out there in the African heat sweating all day? Disgusting. Not gonna, no. No boners anywhere at all. No boners 4 miles for that. Disgusting. Well, as 1999 began to draw to a close, the community started freaking out over the impending apocalypse. The whole Y2K stuff, the computer resets, and all the data and the world's economies were going to collapse and people were going to freak out. Well, the leaders started urging members to confess all of their sins. People started selling off all of their clothes and their other possessions. All of the communal work in the plantations stopped because, I mean, what's the point of working when the world's about to end? And then finally, on January 1st, 2000, nothing happened, obviously. Members of the movement were understandably very upset and started demanding their money and their possessions back. In response, movement leaders claimed that March 17th was the actual day of the apocalypse and urged everyone to just wait out another 3 months. And to mark the occasion, the leaders started planning this huge ceremony at the village of Kanungu. And you can see where this is going, right? It's the People's Temple all over again. So on March 17th, 2000, hundreds of movement members showed up to a large building to pray, to sing, to have a party, and just wait for the end of the world. And as part of the celebration, they roasted 3 bulls and went through 70 crates of soda, which sounds like a Christian party if I've ever heard one. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the building exploded, killing all 530 people inside. 4 days later, as police attempted to figure out the incident, they investigated other properties belonging to the cult. They found 6 bodies sealed inside a latrine at one compound in Kanungu, 153 bodies in the village of Buhunaj, 155 bodies at one of the leaders' homes in Rugazi, and another 81 bodies at another leader's farm. Every single person had either been poisoned or stabbed to death prior to the March 17th event. In the end, and there's kind of conflicting numbers on this, like one source says 778, but if you add up all of the numbers that I just said, you get 925. Either way, nearly 1,000 people died in this mass murder by the cult leaders, who had basically decided to squash any sort of rebellion after their second doomsday prophecy had not come true. I don't know what they were expecting otherwise. Although many people believe that all of the movement members died in the explosion, Ugandan police actually believe that Joseph and Credonia, the 2 original founders of the movement, just disappeared and left the area and did not actually kill themselves, but just killed everyone else that was part of their cult. All right, so the stories of several different cults here in the books, some relatively shorter stories. Like we'll have bigger episodes dedicated to one cult at a time later on, just because some of those stories are a lot more detailed. But for these, at least today, not a ton of details, just kind of the big juicy ones that you saw there. Here's the thing though. Rather than talk about the 3 things that we learned today, I want to do something a little different, because I've got opinions on this, and I want to share with you a few signs that you might be in a cult. What did we learn? All right. So there's no like official checklist, right? Like there's no official, things that you got to check off to maybe know for sure that you're in a cult. But I know several different kinds of organizations that check off a lot of these boxes. All right. So number 1, you might be in a cult if the leader is the ultimate authority. And what it means by that is like, sure, the leader might claim to be a prophet or a messiah or a messenger or a representative of some higher power, but like they are the top dog, number 1 leader. Like if anything bad happens, any kind of legal issues arrive, you don't go to the police, you go to the leader, right? And the leader handles everything, and then everybody moves on. So, all right. Number 2, you might be in a cult if the group suppresses a lot of skepticism. So like, you're only allowed to use like approved sources to study your group's messaging. Critical thinking is very, very frowned upon. You only really need to think through the scope of your group's philosophy, right? Like questioning anything, criticizing anything is super forbidden. And if you do it, you're viewed as like a suppressive person or misguided or apostate or something like that. And you're ostracized. Number 3, you might be in a cult if your group delegitimizes former members. And so like, here's the thing, like for any reason, like if you're in a church and then someone just stops showing up, people tend to kind of criticize that person. They think, well, they're just backslidden. Well, they got into this or got into that. The devil's got a hold of them. It's that person is the problem because they left your group, right? Very, very, it's just like, cool, they left. It shouldn't be like an exclusive group. Like maybe they went to another church or something, but even then they went to that church over across town. They don't know what they're doing or whatever, Number 4, You might be in a cult if the group is paranoid about the outside world. Like the world is kind of billed as this place that's super scary and you should avoid certain places because they're traps for the devil gonna get you and all that kind of stuff. Always talking about we're in the final days. We're in the last days. Lord's coming back soon. Just you get ready now because Lord's, yeah. All right. Number 5, you might be in a cult if the group relies on shame cycles. And so basically, if you kind of build this sort of parasocial relationship with the group where your feelings of love or self-worth or sufficiency are directly tied to how much you participate and interact with that group, that's a cult, dude. Maybe there's really strict codes of conduct. Maybe there's a weird dress code, or maybe there's weird rules that you have to follow. Maybe people feel bad about their shortcomings or their sins. And, it's just, just spend more time here, make sure that you're not distracting yourself with the outside world, whatever the case is. That's, whatever. Number 6, you might be in a cult if the leader is above the law. So, this kind of ties into the first point where it's the problems and issues are dealt with by the leader rather than taking more appropriate channels when necessary. Right. And so, you're going to follow the leader's advice versus more, what maybe police or, some other authority might say. Conversely to that, maybe the leader kind of exploits the followers or people in the group, either economically, financially, a lot of times sexually. We see that with cult leaders a lot. But either way, cult members will find a way to justify it as being okay. All right. Number 7, you might be in a cult if the group uses what is called thought reform methods. So maybe you're asking a question and then the answer is just a weird cliche, or they bounce around the issues. There's a lot of indoctrination, there's a lot of the answers are very similar. What's the meaning of life? Oh, God works in mysterious ways, and all that kind of stuff. Oh, look in the Bible, blah, blah, blah. It's like that, where it's over time that will break down your sense of identity and ability to think critically and rationally. Maybe there's a focus on memorizing scripture. Maybe there's, extended super long prayer sessions, prayer chains, whatever the case you want to call them. All that kind of stuff, Number 8, you might be in a cult if the group is elitist. So, maybe they walk around thinking, oh, I'm a member of this church. I'm a member of this church, and they say that that's a badge of honor for them in the community, or even I serve as a deacon in this church, or, whatever. It's just okay, cool. Who cares? But it's that mindset that they're the best church, and any other church or group kind of doing a similar thing is, I don't know, weird or wrong or less than, right? Number 9, you might be in a cult if there is no financial transparency. If the church or whoever doesn't tell you what they're going to do with your tithes or your offering, well, we're just going to let the Lord take care of it. Nah, I don't know about that, dude. I want to see some receipts. What are we doing with it? It's interesting. And then the last one, and this one is probably less indicative of most cults, at least, modernly. But number 10, you might be in a cult if the group performs secret rituals. So there are things that you didn't find out the church did until you became a member. It's kind of more of a cult. But again, that's more old time, not necessarily. Now, why do I bring up these 10 signs that you might be in a cult? Look, here's the thing. I know of a lot of churches specifically that check off probably 6 to 8 or 9 of these boxes. All right. I'm not going to name names. Elevation. I'm not going to, specifically point out Kenneth Copeland. It's not fair to those people. Joel Osteen. It's just, I'm sorry. My allergies are, really, really acting up here. And so it's just, be careful is what I'm trying to say. Like, go to church. That's fine. If that's your belief system, totally go for it. And I just don't let yourself get into a position where you are following the church and not necessarily following the deity or the inspiration for why the church exists, right? So that's just me speaking from experience. I see a lot of that happening, and I don't want you to fall into that trap. Next week on Our Weird World, another edition, the 6th edition of our Weird Fun Bag series as we start the month of May. Again, 3 more stories, and this time we're looking at Thomas Day, horse butts, and a bad Spider-Man. And I know none of that makes sense to any of you, but that's why you come back next week to find out what it means. All right. Thank you all for listening. Keep telling all your friends. And also, if you or your friends are in a cult, get out. Tell them to get out. Your life will be better without it. It's okay. Jesus will still love you. And keep it weird. Real tearjerker here. 89 cents in the ashtray, half empty bottle of Gatorade rolling in the floorboard, that dirty Braves cap on the dash, dog tags hanging from the rear view, old skull can and cowboy boots, and a Go Army shirt folded in the back. This thing burns gas like crazy, but that's all right. People got their ways of coping, and I've got mine. I leave that radio playing the same old country station where you left it. Yeah, man, I crank it up. You'd probably punch my arm right now if you saw this tear rolling down my face. Hey, man, I'm trying to be tough. And Mama asked me this morning if I'd been by your grave, but that flag of stone ain't where I feel you anyway. I've cussed, I've prayed, I've said goodbye. I've shook my fist and asked God why. These days, when I'm missing you this much, I drive your truck. I roll every window down, and I burn up every back road in this town. I find a field, and I tear it up, till all the pain's a cloud of dust. Yes, sometimes, brother, sometimes I drive your truck, you pandering piece of shit.